Velthar stood on the observation deck of his ship, watching the blue planet slowly rotate below. Earth, the humans called it. Such a simple name for their home world. He had been watching this species for 3 full cycles now, recording every detail, every habit, every weakness. The Kryn Dominion had conquered 73 star systems in the last 1,000 years. Velthar had participated in 12 of those conquests. He knew how to evaluate a species, how to measure their strength, how to predict their response to invasion. The humans would be easy, perhaps the easiest yet. He typed notes into his datapad with practiced efficiency. The humans had discovered faster-than-light travel only 50 years ago. Their ships were bulky and slow compared to Kryn vessels. They had colonized just 7 systems, all within a tiny region of space. Their weapons were primitive projectile accelerators and simple energy beams. They spent more resources on entertainment and art than on military development. Most telling of all, they were divided. Not in the usual ways that conquered species were divided, but in strange, inefficient ways. They argued constantly about philosophy, about ethics, about the proper way to expand into space. Some humans wanted to explore, others wanted to stay home. Some believed in peaceful contact with alien species. Others feared it. They could not even agree on basic military strategy. Velthar smiled. Division was weakness. The Kryn Dominion was unified under the High Command. Every citizen knew their place. Every ship followed orders without question. This was strength. His communication panel chimed. War Marshal Therek's face appeared on the screen, scaled features set in an expression of satisfaction. Velthar, the Council has made its decision. We move forward with the absorption of human space. Their worlds contain resources we need. Their location provides strategic jump points to 3 unexplored sectors. Begin final assessment. Understood, War Marshal. The humans pose minimal threat. I estimate conquest will take no more than 2 solar cycles. Excellent. Continue observation. The fleet will arrive in 1 cycle to begin operations. The screen went dark. Velthar returned to his notes, feeling the familiar anticipation before a conquest. This would be another easy victory for the Dominion. Far below, on the human colony of New Jeju, Captain Deho was having a terrible day. 3 supply ships had arrived late. The new power generator was malfunctioning, and his chief engineer, Hana, was threatening to quit if headquarters sent her 1 more efficiency consultant. They don't understand how colony operations work, Hana said, waving her hands in frustration. These corporate people think we can run a frontier station like a Earth factory. We're dealing with unpredictable conditions, experimental technology, and equipment that breaks down constantly. Deho nodded sympathetically. He had learned long ago that the best thing to do when Hana was upset was to let her vent. She was brilliant, but temperamental. Without her, the station's systems would have failed months ago. I'll talk to headquarters, he promised. No more consultants. Hana sighed. Thank you. Now about the power generator, I need to completely rebuild the cooling system. It'll take 3 days, and we'll be running on backup power. Do what you need to do. As Hana left, Jiho entered. The security officer looked even more tired than usual. Captain, we have another situation. 2 miners got into a fight over salvage rights. One of them pulled a weapon. Anyone hurt? No, I stopped it in time. But tensions are rising. People are worried about the Kryn fleet movements near our border. They're scared. Deho leaned back in his chair. The Kryn. For months, long-range sensors had detected increased military activity in Kryn space. Ships moving in organized patterns, resource stockpiling, all the signs of preparation for expansion. Has Earth responded to our reports? Jiho shook his head. Admiral Hyunwoo sent a message. He says the diplomatic corps is handling it. They believe the Kryn will negotiate rather than attack. Do you believe that? No, Captain. I was in Special Forces before I took this assignment. I've seen how predator species operate. The Kryn are predators. They're not preparing for negotiations. Daeho wanted to argue, but he couldn't. Deep in his gut, he felt the same unease. Something bad was coming. On Earth, in the Grand Chamber of the Galactic Concordance, Ambassador Sora was losing an argument. She had been losing this same argument for 3 months. The Kryn fleet movements are aggressive, she insisted to the assembly of alien diplomats. They're positioning ships along our border. They're building supply depots. These are not peaceful actions. A tall, bird-like alien named Thex chirped a response through its translator. Ambassador Sora, the Kryn Dominion has been expanding for centuries. They always prepare thoroughly before opening diplomatic channels. This is their way. They're not preparing for diplomacy. They're preparing for war. Another alien, resembling a floating jellyfish, pulsed with colored light. Humanity is new to galactic politics. The Kryn are methodical, yes, but they are also practical. War is expensive. They will offer you terms. You should prepare to negotiate. Sora looked around the chamber. Not one species was willing to support humanity. They were all afraid of the Kryn, or indifferent, or simply didn't care about the fate of one more young species. She returned to her quarters and sent an encrypted message to Earth. Diplomatic options exhausted. We are alone. Recommend immediate military preparation. The response came from Admiral Hyunwoo himself. Recommendation noted. However, Earth Command believes we have time for negotiations. Do not alarm the colony worlds. We will handle this carefully. Sora closed her eyes. They didn't understand. The Kryn didn't negotiate with species they saw as weak. They conquered them. Back in orbit above Earth, Velthar completed his final assessment. He had enough data now. The humans were soft, divided, and unprepared. They had some courage, yes. His recordings showed human miners facing dangerous conditions without complaint. Human ships occasionally fought pirates with determination. But courage without power was meaningless. He included one interesting observation in his report. Humans seemed to have an unusual attachment to their dead. They built monuments, they told stories, they remembered names. It was inefficient, wasting resources on those who could no longer contribute, but it showed their weakness. They were too emotional, too sentimental. The Kryn would give them a choice: surrender peacefully and become a client species, or resist and be eliminated. Most species chose survival. The humans would too. Velthar sent his report to War Marshal Thirek and prepared his ship to join the invasion fleet. In one cycle, the conquest would begin. In 2 cycles, it would be over. Humanity would become another footnote in the long history of the Kryn Dominion. He had no doubt about this outcome. His calculations were precise. His observations were thorough. The humans would fall quickly. What Velthar didn't understand, what he couldn't measure with his instruments or predict with his calculations, was that humanity had a gift. When pushed to the edge, when threatened with extinction, when faced with an enemy that wanted to destroy everything they loved, humans didn't break. They transformed. But that lesson was still to come. For now, in the quiet before the storm, both sides prepared. The Kryn assembled their fleet with confidence. The humans went about their daily lives, hoping for peace but feeling the growing shadow of war. Soon, very soon, the first strike would fall, and nothing would ever be the same again. The attack came without warning. Daeho was in his quarters when the alarms started. At first he thought it was another drill, but the sound was wrong. The emergency pattern, the real one. He ran to the command center, pulling on his uniform jacket as he moved. Hana was already there, her face pale as she stared at the sensor displays. "Multiple ships dropping out of jump space," she said, voice shaking. "Kryn signatures, 20 vessels. No, 30. They're still coming. Raise shields. Sound evacuation alert. Get everyone to the ships." Jiho burst through the door. "Captain, we have visual confirmation. Kryn warships. They're targeting the orbital platforms." The first explosion hit before Daeho could respond. Through the viewport, he saw the northern orbital platform erupt in flames. Debris scattered in all directions. Hundreds of people had been on that platform. Now they were gone. "We can't fight this," Hana said. "We need to evacuate now." Daiho grabbed the communications panel. "All hands, this is the captain. Abandon station. Get to the transport ships. Move quickly, but don't panic. We will get as many people out as possible." But even as he spoke, more explosions rocked the station. The Kryn weren't targeting just military installations. They were destroying everything: residential sections, agricultural domes, even the medical center. Daiho watched in horror as a Kryn ship fired on a fleeing civilian transport. The small vessel exploded instantly. No escape pods, no survivors. "They're killing everyone," Jiho whispered. "They're not even asking for surrender." The next 4 hours were a nightmare. Daiho managed to get the Meridian Dawn undocked, but the ship was damaged, systems failing, the jump drive offline. Hana worked miracles keeping the engines running while Jiho organized the 2,000 refugees crowding every available space. As they limped away from New Jeju, Daiho looked back. The colony was burning. Kryn ships orbited above, firing methodically at anything that moved. He saw escape pods being destroyed. He saw soldiers in Kryn armor walking through the ruins of the main settlement, executing anyone they found. A young girl in the refugee bay was crying. She was maybe 7 years old, clutching a stuffed animal. "Where's my daddy?" she kept asking. "Where's my daddy?" Nobody answered her. Nobody had the heart to tell her that her father was probably dead. At Harmony Station, Governor Minho received the news of New Jeju's fall with cold fury. He had 17,000 people on his station, 3 small defense ships, and a Kryn fleet heading his way. "We can't stop them," his military advisor said. "We should evacuate now while we have time." "No," Minho said quietly. "We evacuate the civilians. Military personnel stay. We buy them time." "Governor, that's suicide." "I know." The evacuation began immediately. Women and children first, then non-essential personnel. The defense ships formed a screen, helping the transports escape. Minho stayed on the command deck, coordinating everything. When the Kryn arrived, Minho ordered his 3 small ships to attack. It was hopeless. The Kryn fleet was 50 times larger. But every minute the defense ships fought was another minute for the transports to reach jump distance. The Kryn seemed amused by the resistance. Velthar, watching from his ship, recorded the battle with clinical interest. The humans fought bravely but stupidly. One of their ships rammed a Kryn destroyer in a suicide attack. What was the point? The destroyer's shields barely flickered, but Velthar noticed something odd. The human ships weren't trying to win. They were trying to delay, and they succeeded. Most of the civilian transports escaped before Harmony Station fell. Minho died at his post, still sending coordinates to fleeing ships until the moment a Kryn missile struck the command center. His last words were instructions for an evacuation route. Redstone Colony lasted less than a day. The mining operation had minimal defenses and no military ships. The Kryn simply landed troops and took control. 20,000 miners were captured. Those who resisted were killed immediately. The rest were loaded into cargo ships to be transported to labor camps. In 3 days, 3 human colonies were gone. The death toll was staggering. 30,000 dead. 15,000 captured. The human frontier fleet was destroyed. News reached Earth slowly, each report worse than the last. Admiral Hyunwoo sat in his office, reading casualty lists with growing horror. He had been wrong, catastrophically wrong. The Kryn hadn't come to negotiate. They had come to conquer. Ambassador Sora arrived from the Concordance with even worse news. "No one will help us. The other species are afraid. They say the Kryn are too powerful. They offer sympathy but no military support. What do they suggest we do?" "Surrender. Negotiate terms. Accept client species status. Hyunwoo stood and walked to the window overlooking the military complex. Is that what you recommend? No, Sora said firmly. I've seen the reports from the colonies. The Kryn don't want clients. They want slaves or corpses. If we surrender, they'll destroy us anyway. A message came through. The Meridian Dawn had reached Earth space. Captain Daeho was requesting permission to testify before the fleet command. Send him in immediately, Hyunwoo ordered. Daeho entered the command chamber 2 hours later. He looked terrible. His uniform was torn and burned. His face was covered in ash, but his eyes were clear and angry. The Fleet Command Council assembled. Admirals, generals, civilian leaders. Daeho stood before them and told his story. He showed them footage from New Jeju, Kryn soldiers laughing as they executed families, commanders ordering hospitals burned, children shot while trying to reach rescue ships. The room was silent when he finished. One admiral, an old woman named Kyung, spoke first. How many refugees did you save, Captain? 2,000 out of 25,000 colonists. That's more than anyone expected you to save. You did well. I watched them die, Daeho said, voice breaking. I watched them murder children, and I ran because my ship couldn't fight. I ran and left them to die. Admiral Hyunwoo stood. You did your duty, Captain. You saved who you could. Now we need you to do something else. Tell every ship captain what you saw. Tell every soldier. Tell everyone. The Kryn showed us their true face. Now we show them ours. He turned to the council. Send the recall order. Every ship, every operative, every resource. Everyone comes home immediately. We're done defending colonies. We're done hoping for negotiations. The Kryn want war. We'll give them war. One of the civilian leaders stood. Admiral, with respect, we should consider surrender terms. The casualties are already unacceptable, Hyunwoo interrupted. The Kryn murdered 30,000 of our people. They did it deliberately, cruelly. They wanted to break our spirit. Instead, they made a mistake. What mistake? They made us angry. Orders went out across human space. Every military vessel, from massive carriers to small patrol ships, began returning to Earth and Mars. Civilian ships, too. Engineers, scientists, construction workers, everyone. To Velthar, watching from his observation post, it looked like a retreat, a collapse. The humans were abandoning their remaining colonies, pulling everything back to their core worlds. He reported this to War Marshal Thirek with satisfaction. The humans are broken, he wrote. They're consolidating for a desperate last stand around Earth. I estimate they'll surrender within 2 weeks of our arrival. But Hana, working in the Meridian Dawn's engine room, knew different. She had received new orders. Orders that excited and terrified her in equal measure. They want me to do what? She asked Daeho, reading the technical specifications. They want you to make our ships faster, more maneuverable. They don't care if it's safe. They don't care if it's tested. They just want it done. These modifications could tear the ships apart. I know. People could die. People are already dying. Hana looked at the plans again. They were brilliant and insane. Push the reactors beyond safety limits, strip the ships of everything non-essential, turn civilian vessels into weapons. Take every piece of captured Kryn technology and reverse engineer it in weeks instead of years. How long do I have? 3 weeks. That's impossible. Then make the impossible possible. Because when the Kryn come, we're not running anymore. We're fighting. And we're going to win. Hana stared at him. Then she smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. Give me access to every engineer in the fleet. Give me all the resources you have. And tell anyone who complains about safety regulations that they can file their complaints after we've killed every Kryn ship in our space. Across Earth and Mars, humanity began to change. Factories retooled. Scientists worked without sleep. Weapons were designed, built, tested, and deployed in record time. The peaceful civilization that had spent a century avoiding conflict remembered something they had tried to forget. They remembered how to be dangerous. And soon, very soon, the Kryn would learn what humans become when you threaten their families. 3 weeks. That's all the time humanity had to prepare. 3 weeks to transform from a peaceful civilization into something else, something darker, something necessary. Hana had not slept properly in those 3 weeks. She moved between ships like a ghost, covered in grease and exhaustion, pushing engineers to perform miracles. The modifications she designed were dangerous, experimental, but they worked. Human ships could now make rapid jumps that would destroy Kryn vessels. Their engines burned hotter, moved faster, turned sharper. The cost was high. Some ships would fail. Some crews would die from the strain. But that was acceptable now. Everything was acceptable if it helped them win. Jiho trained soldiers for a new kind of warfare. Not the careful, measured combat they had learned in academy, but brutal, close-quarters fighting. Boarding actions, suicide runs, tactics that military textbooks called reckless. The Kryn fight with honor, he told his troops. They have rules, protocols. We're going to throw all of that away. When we board their ships, we don't take prisoners. We don't give warnings. We destroy and move on. Does anyone have a problem with that? Nobody raised their hand. They had all seen the footage from New Jeju. They had all heard the stories. Honor was for species who respected it. The Kryn had proven they respected nothing. On Earth, factories worked 24 hours a day. Civilian ships were stripped and armed. Cargo haulers became missile platforms. Mining vessels got military-grade lasers. Even passenger ships were modified with weapons and armor. Admiral Hyunwoo stood on the bridge of the Indomitable, his new flagship. Around him, the human fleet assembled. It was larger than it had been 3 weeks ago, much larger. Ships that hadn't existed before, weapons that hadn't been tested, crews that were exhausted but determined. Captain Daeho, given command of a strike wing, joined the fleet with the repaired Meridian Dawn. Hana had rebuilt his ship into something new, faster, meaner, ready. Captain Yuna, a brilliant tactical officer, commanded the carrier group. Her ships held hundreds of small fighter craft, each modified for maximum damage. Suicide drones, remote missiles. Anything that could hurt the Kryn. And then the Kryn arrived. War Marshal Theorek's Second Fleet dropped out of jump space at the edge of the Sol system. 200 ships. The largest Kryn battle force assembled in decades. He expected to find desperate defenses, scattered resistance, quick surrender. Instead, he found an armada. Velthar, standing on the bridge of his cruiser, stared at the sensor readings in disbelief. The human fleet had tripled in size. How? It had been less than a month. Where had they gotten these ships? War Marshal, the humans are hailing us, a communications officer reported. Thierek laughed. They wish to surrender already? Put them through. Admiral Hyunwoo's face appeared on the screen. He looked tired but calm. Behind him, Velthar could see dozens of other humans working at stations. All of them focused, all of them ready. You attacked our colonies, Hyunwoo said simply. You murdered our people. You thought we were weak because we chose peace. You were wrong. This is your only warning. Leave now, or be destroyed. Therek's laughter grew louder. You dare threaten the Kryn Dominion? We have conquered 73 species. You are primitives who have barely left your own world. Surrender now, and some of you may survive. No. The single word hung in the silence. Then Hyunwoo spoke again. You came to our home. You killed our children. Now we're going to show you what happens when you wake something you should have left alone. There will be no surrender, no negotiation, no mercy. You taught us that at New Jeju. Now learn the lesson yourself. The transmission cut off. Thierek turned to his fleet commander. Destroy them, all of them. The battle began. The Kryn fleet advanced in their traditional formation. Battleships in front, cruisers supporting, carriers in the back. It was a proven strategy that had worked for centuries. The human fleet did something unexpected. They charged. No careful positioning, no defensive screens, just a straight, aggressive rush toward the Kryn lines. Ships that should have been protecting each other instead scattered, moving independently, attacking from all angles. It was chaos. It was insane. It was terrifyingly effective. Hana's modifications showed their worth immediately. Human ships darted between Kryn vessels, too fast to track properly. They fired weapons and jumped away before return fire could hit them. When Kryn shields adapted to one weapon type, humans switched to another. Captain Deho led his wing straight at a Kryn battleship. The massive vessel fired its main guns, but Deho's ships split apart, letting the shots pass harmlessly between them. Then they converged again, all firing at the same shield point. The Kryn shields flickered and died. The battleship tried to turn, but it was too slow. Deho's wing hammered it with everything they had. Missiles, lasers, kinetic rounds. The battleship's armor cracked, then exploded. First blood to humanity. But the cost was high. 3 of Deho's ships were destroyed in the attack. Crews he had trained with, people he knew, gone in flashes of light. He pushed the grief away. There would be time for mourning later. Right now, there was only the fight. Captain Yuna's carrier group unleashed hell. Thousands of small craft poured from her ships. Suicide drones that crashed into Kryn vessels, detonating with enough force to breach hulls. Remote missiles that chased Kryn ships through evasive maneuvers. Human pilots in fighters that moved like angry insects, stinging and retreating. The Kryn tried to adapt. They tightened their formation, increased their point defense fire. But for every human craft they shot down, 3 more took its place. Velthar watched in growing horror as his fleet began to suffer real losses. This wasn't how conquests worked. The primitive species were supposed to break under superior firepower. They were supposed to retreat and beg for mercy. Instead, the humans fought like they had nothing to lose, like death was preferable to defeat. A human cargo ship, converted into a weapons platform, rammed a Kryn cruiser. The impact destroyed both vessels. But the cargo ship was already evacuated. The crew had jumped to escape pods, firing handheld weapons as they went. The Kryn cruiser had 500 soldiers aboard. It was an insane trade. The Kryn should have been winning this exchange, but somehow they weren't. Jiho led the first boarding action. His team used a new tactic. They didn't dock properly. They just blew holes in the Kryn hull and jumped through wearing powered armor. The Kryn had designed their ships to repel organized assaults through airlocks. They had never imagined humans would just come through the walls. Jiho's team moved through the Kryn ship like ghosts. They destroyed critical systems, killed anyone who resisted, and retreated before reinforcements arrived. 3 minutes. In and out. The Kryn ship was left crippled, drifting. Across the battlefield, this pattern repeated. Human ships taking losses but giving more than they received. Human crews pushing their vessels beyond safe limits. Human soldiers fighting with a ferocity that shocked even their own commanders. War Marshal Thirek realized with growing dread that he was losing. Not slowly, not gracefully, but losing decisively against a species that should have been easy prey. He ordered a retreat. The human fleet pursued, not to capture, not to negotiate, but to kill. They chased fleeing Kryn ships, destroying every vessel they could catch. When Kryn ships tried to surrender, their signals were ignored. The humans remembered New Jeju. They remembered children shot while fleeing. They remembered hospitals burning. No mercy. None asked, none given. The battle lasted 18 hours. When it ended, the Kryn Second Fleet was broken. 80 ships destroyed, 30 more crippled. The rest fled into jump space, damaged and terrified. War Marshal Thirek's flagship was among the destroyed. He died when Captain Yuna's fighter group overwhelmed his defenses and reduced his ship to debris. The human fleet regrouped around Earth. They had lost 60 ships. 20,000 crew members dead. The cost was terrible, but they had won. Admiral Hyunwoo stood in the memorial hall, looking at names being added to the walls. So many names, each one a person, a life, a future that would never happen. Daeho found him there. "Admiral, the fleet is ready for new orders." "Orders?" Hyunwoo looked at him. "We just won the greatest naval battle in human history." "I know, and now we attack." "Attack where?" "Everywhere, every Kryn base, every supply depot, every garrison world. We don't stop until they understand that attacking humanity was the worst mistake they ever made." Hyunwoo studied the young captain. Daeho had changed. They all had. The gentle civilization that had reached for the stars with open hands had remembered an older truth. Sometimes, to preserve peace, you had to be willing to wage war with absolute conviction. "You're right," Hyunwoo said quietly. "Prepare the fleet. We're done defending. Now we hunt." Velthar's ship limped into Kryn space, one of the few that escaped. He spent 3 days writing his report. Every word felt like a confession of failure. The humans weren't weak. They were the most dangerous species the Kryn had ever encountered, not because of their technology or their numbers, but because of something else. Something Velthar couldn't quite name. They fought like the universe itself had wronged them, like they would burn their own worlds to ashes before letting the Kryn win, like death was just another weapon to be used. The Kryn High Command read his report with disbelief. Then they read casualty reports. Then they realized the truth. They had awakened something terrible, and now it was coming for them. The Kryn High Command met in emergency session. They had ruled an empire for 1,000 years. Never once had a newly contacted species defeated them. The chamber, usually calm and orderly, filled with angry voices. "We should negotiate," said Council Member Dresch. "Cut our losses. Establish a border with the humans." "Negotiate?" Warfleet Commander Zelmoth slammed his fist on the table. "We just lost 80 ships. If we negotiate now, every conquered species in our empire will see it as weakness. There will be rebellions everywhere." "Then what do you suggest?" "Total commitment. We mobilize every fleet, every garrison. We crush humanity so completely that no species will ever dare resist us again." The vote was close, but the hardliners won. The Kryn would commit everything to destroying humanity. They began pulling ships from across their empire. Fleets that had been keeping conquered worlds in line. Garrisons that maintained order. All returning to the core for one massive assault. It would take time to assemble. 3 months. Maybe 4. But when the Kryn struck again, humanity would be erased from existence. That was the plan. But Admiral Hyunwoo had no intention of waiting 3 months. He stood before Earth's United Fleet Command, presenting his strategy. The holographic display showed the entire Kryn Empire. Hundreds of systems, thousands of installations, an empire that had taken centuries to build. "We're going to tear it apart," Hyunwoo said simply. "Fast strike groups. Hit their supply lines. Destroy their communication networks. Liberate their conquered worlds. We won't give them time to prepare. We won't let them mass their forces. We keep moving, keep attacking, until the Kryn Empire collapses under its own weight." One admiral objected. "That's suicide. We'll be operating deep in enemy territory with no support." "Yes," Hyunwoo agreed. "It's dangerous. Many of us won't come back, but the alternative is waiting here while they gather strength. We give them 3 months, they'll return with a fleet 10 times larger. We can't afford to defend. We have to attack." Earth's civilian government was horrified. This wasn't defense anymore. This was invasion, aggression, everything humanity had tried to move beyond. But Ambassador Sora spoke for many when she addressed the council. "The Kryn came to our home. They murdered children in their schools. They burned hospitals. They laughed while they did it. We tried peace. We tried diplomacy. They answered with genocide. So now we answer with war. Total war. The kind where we don't stop until our enemy cannot threaten us ever again. The vote passed. Barely. But it passed. The human fleet divided into rapid strike groups. Each group had 10 to 20 ships, fast, heavily armed, carrying enough fuel and ammunition for multiple engagements. They would hit targets, disappear, and hit again somewhere else. Captain Daiho took command of Strike Group 7. His mission was to attack Kryn supply convoys and liberate conquered species. Simple orders, impossible task. But Daiho had changed since New Jeju. The guilt he carried from watching people die had transformed into cold determination. He would not stop. He would not hesitate. He would fight until humanity was safe or he was dead. There was no middle ground anymore. Captain Yuna commanded Strike Group 3. Her mission was to destroy Kryn military installations. She had the most dangerous job because she was attacking the most heavily defended targets. "You'll take casualties," Admiral Hyunwoo had warned her. "I know," Yuna replied, "but every base we destroy is one less threat to Earth. That's worth any price." The campaign began. Strike Group 7 jumped into the Kryn-controlled system of Thelis Prime. Intelligence suggested it was a resource world, lightly defended. Intelligence was wrong. 3 Kryn warships protected orbital facilities. Daiho didn't hesitate. "All ships, attack pattern Delta. Hit them fast and get out." The battle was brutal and quick. Human ships swarmed the Kryn vessels, overwhelming their defenses through sheer aggression. But the cost was high. 2 of Daiho's ships were destroyed. 500 crew members dead. They couldn't afford to mourn, not yet. Daiho broadcast a message to the planet below. "This is the human fleet. The Kryn occupation is over. Fight with us or stand aside. But you don't have to be slaves anymore." He didn't know if anyone would listen. The Theli had been conquered 40 years ago. They might be too afraid, too broken. Then the uprising began. Theli workers in the resource processing centers sabotaged equipment. Theli civilians attacked Kryn soldiers in the streets. It was disorganized and chaotic, but it was resistance. Real resistance. Daiho sent down landing parties to support the rebellion. Jiho led the ground forces, distributing weapons and teaching basic tactics. Within 3 days, Thelis Prime was free. Before leaving, Daiho met with Theli leaders. They were insectoid beings, their communication translated through electronic devices. "Why did you help us?" they asked. "The Kryn will punish you for this." "The Kryn already tried to exterminate us," Daiho replied. "Now we're making sure they can never threaten anyone again. Spread the word. Tell other conquered species. The Kryn can be beaten." Resistance is possible. Strike Group 7 jumped away, leaving behind a freed world and a dangerous idea: rebellion. Captain Yuna's mission was more direct. Her target was a Kryn military academy on Drexar. It wasn't just a training facility, it was a symbol, the heart of Kryn military culture, heavily defended by orbital fortresses and shield generators. "This is going to hurt," Hana warned over the communication channel. She was aboard Yuna's flagship, having insisted on joining the most dangerous missions. "Those shields are strong. Even with our new weapons, we'll take heavy damage." "I know," Yuna said calmly. "Do it anyway." The attack was devastating for both sides. Human ships pushed through defensive fire, absorbing damage that would have crippled them weeks ago. But Hana's modifications held. The ships survived. Barely. Yuna's plasma weapons tore through Kryn shields. New weapons, reverse-engineered from captured technology and improved. Where Kryn plasma dispersed, human plasma focused. Where Kryn shields deflected, human weapons penetrated. The orbital fortresses fell one by one. The Academy world's defenses crumbled. Yuna allowed civilian evacuations. She wasn't interested in massacring non-combatants. But the military facilities, those she burned to the ground. She left a message in the ruins, a simple transmission broadcast across Kryn space. "You came to our home. Now we've come to yours. This is just the beginning. Across Kryn territory, this pattern repeated. Human strike groups appeared, attacked, and vanished. Supply convoys destroyed. Communication relays blown apart. Garrison bases reduced to debris. And everywhere they went, conquered species rose in rebellion. The Kryn Empire, so used to methodical conquest and stable rule, couldn't adapt to humanity's chaotic aggression. They tried to respond, but human ships were everywhere and nowhere. Attack here, and they'd disappear. Reinforce there, and they'd strike somewhere else. Velthar, now serving on a damaged cruiser guarding a supply depot, wrote in his personal log with shaking hands. I no longer understand these humans. They've lost more ships than they destroyed at Sol. By any rational calculation, they should retreat. Instead, they push deeper. They fight as if death means nothing, as if the only thing that matters is hurting us. His depot was attacked 3 days later. Strike Group 12, led by a human captain named Tai Yang. The depot was destroyed in minutes. Velthar's ship escaped, but 60% of his crew didn't. On Earth, factories worked without stopping. Every resource, every piece of technology, every scientific breakthrough was weaponized. Artists created psychological warfare broadcasts. Musicians wrote songs that made soldiers feel invincible. Teachers educated children about New Jeju, Harmony Station, Redstone. An entire generation was learning that humanity had tried peace, but was forced into war. And when humanity went to war, it did so absolutely. The Kryn High Command watched their empire crumble in real time. 30 garrison worlds lost. Supply lines disrupted, core fleets destroyed trying to respond to human raids, and the rebellions, everywhere rebellions. Species that had been conquered decades ago suddenly believed resistance was possible. They sabotaged Kryn facilities. They attacked isolated garrisons. They fed information to human forces. The empire was fracturing from within. Warfleet Commander Zelmoth studied strategic maps with growing desperation. Every simulation showed the same result. If the war continued at this pace, the Kryn Empire would collapse within a year. Not from military defeat, but from internal collapse. They couldn't maintain control while fighting humanity. We need to end this, he told the High Command. Not by destroying humanity, by negotiating. Negotiate? The council members looked shocked. We don't negotiate from weakness. We're already weak. The humans have proven it. They've torn our empire apart in 6 months. If we don't end this now, there will be nothing left to save. The debate raged for days, but the numbers didn't lie. 30% of Kryn territory was in open rebellion. Their military was exhausted. Supply chains were destroyed, and the humans showed no sign of stopping. Finally, reluctantly, the Kryn High Command made their decision. They would sue for peace. The message reached Admiral Hyunwoo while he was reviewing casualty reports. 50,000 human soldiers dead. 200 ships destroyed, countless civilians on colony worlds still suffering from the initial attacks. The Kryn wanted to negotiate. What do you want to do? Ambassador Sora asked him. Hyunwoo thought about New Jeju, about children shot while fleeing, about Governor Minho dying at his post, about every name on the memorial walls. We negotiate, he said finally, but not on their terms, on ours. They wanted to conquer us. Instead, they'll watch their empire fall apart. They'll pay reparations. They'll release every conquered species, and they'll stand trial for war crimes. They'll never agree to all that. Then the war continues until they do, or until there's no Kryn Empire left. Either way is fine with me. The message was sent back to Kryn space. Humanity's terms were clear and non-negotiable. Velthar, reading the transmission from his refugee station, understood the truth at last. The war hadn't just defeated the Kryn Dominion, it had transformed humanity into the most feared species in the galaxy. Not because they were the strongest, but because they had proven they were the most dangerous when pushed. They would burn worlds to ashes before accepting subjugation. He wrote one final assessment. Assessment: humanity do not engage under any circumstances. They chose peace once. If we force them to choose war again, there may be no survivors to remember why. The fury had been unleashed, and the galaxy would never be the same. 6 months. That's how long the war lasted. 6 months that changed everything. Velthar sat in a diplomatic shuttle heading toward human space. He wore formal attire now, not a military uniform. His rank had been stripped after the supply depot disaster. But that didn't matter anymore. The Kryn military was broken, and he had been chosen for this mission because he knew humans better than anyone else in the Dominion. He had watched them for 3 cycles before the war. He had fought them during the war. He had written more reports about humanity than any other Kryn officer, and all of his reports had been wrong. The shuttle approached the neutral station where negotiations would take place. Human warships escorted them, weapons clearly active. A reminder, a threat. You are here because we allow it. Ambassador Sora met them at the docking bay. Velthar remembered her from his early reports. She had been a gentle diplomat, arguing for peace in the Galactic Concordance. Always polite, always seeking compromise. The woman who greeted them now was different. Harder, colder. Her eyes held no warmth. "Welcome," she said without any real welcome in her voice. "Follow me. The negotiations begin in 1 hour." The Kryn delegation consisted of 5 members. Velthar was the military observer. The others were diplomats and legal experts. They walked through the station corridors in silence, past human soldiers who watched them with open hostility. A human child, maybe 8 years old, stood with her mother near a viewport. She saw the Kryn delegation and started crying. The mother held her close, whispering comfort. But her eyes, when they met Velthar's, held pure hatred. Velthar understood. That child had probably lost family at New Jeju or one of the other colonies. To her, Kryn were monsters. And maybe she was right. The negotiation chamber was large and formal. Ambassador Sora sat at one end of a long table. Admiral Hyunwoo sat beside her, wearing full military dress. Around them, other human officials, military leaders, legal experts, representatives from freed worlds. Warfleet Commander Zelmoth appeared on a large screen, attending via secure transmission from Kryn space. He looked tired, defeated. Sora began without preamble. "These are humanity's terms, non-negotiable, complete withdrawal from all formerly human territory, war reparations of 5 trillion credits for destroyed colonies, liberation of all species under Kryn control, war crimes trials for military commanders responsible for civilian massacres, permanent monitoring stations in Kryn space to ensure compliance." The lead Kryn diplomat, an elderly official named Kreth, made a shocked gesture. "These terms are outrageous. You're treating us like a completely defeated enemy. The war ended in stalemate." "Stalemate?" Admiral Hyunwoo leaned forward. "You've lost 30% of your territory to rebellion. Your supply chains are destroyed. Your fleets are scattered. You came here begging for peace because you know if this war continues, your empire will cease to exist. There is no stalemate." "You lost." Kreth tried to argue, but Zelmoth's voice cut through. "Enough. The Admiral is correct. We lost. Continue with the terms." The negotiations continued for 3 weeks. The Kryn tried to negotiate better terms, but humanity remained firm. Every attempt to reduce reparations was rejected. Every suggestion to modify the war crimes trials was denied. During a recess, Velthar found himself alone with Ambassador Sora in a side chamber. He had to understand. "Why?" he asked. "We studied your species carefully. You were divided, peaceful. You spent more on art than weapons. How did you become this?" Sora looked at him for a long moment. "You made a fundamental mistake. You thought kindness was weakness. You thought because we chose peace, we couldn't wage war. You didn't understand that we chose peace because we knew what war cost." Then what changed? You killed our children. You came to our homes and murdered families. You did it casually like it meant nothing. Like we meant nothing. Her voice was cold. You woke something we had tried to bury. You reminded us what humans become when everything we love is threatened. We didn't know. You didn't care. That's worse. You evaluated us and decided we were weak enough to conquer. You never asked if conquering us was wise. You just assumed you could. Velthar had no response. She was right. The negotiations concluded. The Kryn accepted all terms. They had no choice. Warfleet Commander Zelmoth signed the treaty documents with visible reluctance, but he signed. Humanity had won. Completely. Absolutely. Velthar returned to Kryn space on a refugee transport. The mighty warship he had once served on was destroyed. His empire was broken. His certainties were shattered. He spent the journey writing his final report. The classification didn't matter anymore. Truth mattered. Assessment of humanity, he wrote. They are not the strongest species technologically. They are not the most numerous. They are not the most advanced. But they are the most dangerous species I have ever encountered. When pushed to extinction, they did not calculate odds. They did not seek survival at any cost. They chose to fight with absolute conviction, accepting horrific losses as the price of victory. They transformed their entire civilization into a weapon in 3 weeks. They turned civilian ships into warships. They taught children to hate us in schools. They made every resource, every person, every piece of technology part of their war machine. But most frightening was their adaptability. They studied our tactics and developed counters. They stole our technology and improved it. They fought without honor or rules, using whatever methods worked. They evolved faster than we could respond. The Kryn Dominion conquered 73 species over 1,000 years. It took humanity 6 months to destroy us, not because they were superior, but because they were willing to pay any price for survival. Final recommendation: humanity must never be threatened again. If we ever give them reason to fight, they will show no mercy. They spared us by accepting surrender. Next time, they might not. On Earth, memorial ceremonies were held across the planet. 50,000 names added to the walls. New Jeju, Harmony Station, Redstone, the Sol Defense, the Liberation Campaign. Admiral Hyunwoo stood with Daeho, Hana, and Jiho in the memorial gardens. They were all changed, scarred, older than their years. Was it worth it? Hana asked quietly. She had lost 3 fingers during an engine explosion. The prosthetics worked fine, but she still felt the phantom pain. Hyunwoo took a long time to answer. We didn't want this war. We tried everything to avoid it. But once it started, we had 2 choices: fight or die. We fought, we won, and we made sure every species in this galaxy understands what it costs to threaten humanity. Daeho looked at the names on the wall. He recognized so many. Crew members from the Meridian Dawn. Soldiers from Thelis Prime. Civilians from New Jeju. The Kryn thought we were weak because we chose peace. They learned differently. Peaceful species make dangerous enemies, Jiho said. We know what war is. We know what it costs. We spent centuries learning to avoid it. But when you force us to fight, we remember everything we learned. All the tactics, all the cruelty, all the determination. We become what we tried to leave behind. A message came through. Captain Yuna was heading out with her battle group, not to fight, to patrol, to guard the borders, to ensure no one else made the Kryn's mistake. The human fleet was larger now, better armed, more experienced. The peaceful civilization had transformed, not completely, but enough. They still valued art and culture. They still sought cooperation and trade. But now, backing those gentle hands was an iron fist. Ambassador Sora addressed the Galactic Concordance for the first time since the war ended. The other species listened with new respect and barely concealed fear. "Humanity remains committed to peaceful coexistence," she said. "We seek trade, cooperation, and mutual prosperity with all species. But we will never again be victims. Any attack on human territory will be treated as an existential threat, and we will respond accordingly." The message was clear. Make peace with humanity, and they would be the best allies you could ask for. Generous, helpful, cooperative, but threaten them, and you would face something terrifying. A species that would sacrifice everything for survival, that would fight without rules or limits, that would burn the galaxy to protect their own. On a refugee station in former Kryn space, Velthar watched Sora's address. He understood now. The humans weren't trying to conquer anyone. They weren't seeking empire. They just wanted to be left alone. But if you didn't leave them alone, if you threatened their families and homes, they would show you what humans become when they're fighting for survival. He remembered his first report. Assessment: humanity. Low threat. Suitable for absorption. He looked at his final report. Assessment: humanity. Do not engage under any circumstances. Everything he had known about power, about conquest, about strength, had been wrong. The Kryn were strong. The humans were dangerous. There was a difference. Strong species could be defeated through superior force. Dangerous species couldn't be defeated because they would rather die fighting than accept subjugation. The galaxy would remember this war. They would remember that humanity tried peace first, that they offered negotiation, cooperation, friendship. And when those offers were answered with murder, humanity had shown what they truly were. Not victims, not primitives, not another species to be conquered and absorbed, but survivors, fighters, a species that would do anything, sacrifice anything, destroy anything to protect their own. Velthar closed his reports and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, human ships patrolled borders that the Kryn had once thought to claim. Somewhere out there, freed species were rebuilding with human help. Somewhere out there, the Kryn Empire was trying to survive its own collapse. And somewhere out there, humanity was watching, waiting, ready. The sleeping giant had awakened, and the galaxy understood at last. Leave humanity alone, and they would be the best neighbors you could ask for. Threaten them, and you would learn why it's dangerous to wake things you don't understand. Velthar had seen humanity unleash its fury. It had shattered everything he knew about war, about power, about survival. But most of all, it had shattered the idea that peaceful species were weak. Sometimes the most dangerous enemies were those who knew exactly what war cost, because they knew how to fight it without hesitation, without mercy, without stopping until victory was absolute. The war was over. Humanity had won, and the galaxy would never make the Kryn's mistake again. The lesson was learned. The price was paid. And the humans, having proven their point, returned to their gentle pursuits of art and exploration and peace, but always watching, always ready, always remembering what they had to become to survive. That memory would keep them safe, and it would keep the galaxy peaceful, because no one wanted to see what humanity would become if forced to fight again. The fury had been unleashed once. Once was enough.